let's kick this off. So pour out your 15 mils of sample one into your glass. We have water here beside us. I like to add a little bit of water to whiskey. I taste it neat first, then I add a little bit of water. But we'll try and stay hydrated as this goes through. It's kind of important. I would normally check the color of the whiskey, but in very recent times I've stopped because we have a perception of the color of whiskey that the deeper it is, the more golden it is. We kind of think that the older it is, or maybe the better, the higher quality the whiskey is. That's not necessarily true, right? Because there's a color out there called E150A, I think, Colm, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's caramel color. Yeah.
That gets added in, right? And it's what you'll find is, right, it's quite interesting, right? What you'll find is some of the cheapest whiskies out there have the best color to them. Some of the most expensive and aged whiskies would have what we would call almost like an off color. So we've stopped looking at the color, right, as a general rule, but we do just look to check the clarity, right? And the clarity on this whiskey is absolutely beautiful, right? As we look at it, right, I mean, like, I can see that it's not very oily. There's a little bit of oil to it. As you swirl it around the glass, you know, you can see a little bit of the tears. Not hugely oily, but there is a little bit of oil to it. Okay, we're going to nose it.
There's a nice bit of legs in it, all right.
Nice, yeah.
I think because I know what every whiskey here is, should be important to tell everyone that this whiskey actually does not have E150A added to it. So this is actually at its natural color. Beautiful, almost
So
copper bronze color.
I'm going to tell you something. We've changed up the numbers since you sent them on. Just to get in your head.
It's a redbreast. Is it redbreast 27?
Yeah, no. No, we didn't change it up. We didn't change them. No, you're all right.
It doesn't smell like it's going to burn me to death, which is nice.
It's always a very nice thing to happen.
This, right, I'm going to say, and this reminds me, right, of almost like a candy floss caramel kind of flavor, smell, aroma, Swedish, right?
Like you're definitely getting a kind of vanilla taste off it as well. A vanilla scent.
Absolutely. Well, like that would definitely suggest then there's a huge amount of bourbon cask aging on it. If you're talking, you know, that sort of custard flavor, those tropical fruits, bananas, so on, a lot of dried fruit. You're definitely talking a high degree of bourbon cask aging on it.
So just Eric is asking us just how we mentioned oil. How do we know about the oil in this, right? So you can't really see in the glass, right? But as we swirl the glass, right, you move the liquid up and down the side of the glass. What you'll actually get is you will get almost like tears, raindrops, for want of a better word, running down the side of the glass, right? And it's where the oil is adhering to the glass a little bit longer than the more aqueous part of it, and it just gives you we call it whiskey tears, right? Now it is an indication. It's not the be all and end all, right? Because different people are doing different things with different whiskies. So it just is a general indication when you see it. It's a lovely thing to see because you know that typically you know certain things out of it because oilier whiskies are sometimes a little bit more flavoursome than whiskies that have a little bit less oil in it. But look, down to the aroma. So Emma, what do you think of this one?
Lovely. I'll definitely be drinking all of it, I'd say.
So will we taste?
Dan tasted it already, Joe. I saw him.
Now I know there's zero, you know, everyone's going to have a different way of tasting whiskey and so on and so forth. But I think for like, if you're a beginner tasting whiskey, best thing you can do with a whiskey, especially if it might be some of your first drink of the day. For some of you, it may not be. The best thing you can do is just hold it in your mouth for a couple of seconds and just let it swirl around there. Hold it in there for 5 or 6 seconds. Just let all the saliva in your mouth just join up with the whiskey. It'll remove some of the alcoholic burn that some of you will experience as well. But also what it'll do is it really enhance those flavors that are just hidden below the whiskey in the initial taste, and it'll just allow it to explode a bit more.
So for anyone who's watching, I added a little bit of water to it, right? And I typically do add water to whiskey when I'm tasting it. I will always taste it neat, but I'll add a little drop of water to it afterwards. and it just, for me, it just brings out some of the different aromas and different flavors. Like from this one, I can definitely get a nice kick of caramel, nice kick of vanilla. There's like almost like a toffee kind of, it's supposed to be a.
You know, I'm getting a bit of apricot as well.
Yep.
Yeah, there's definitely something fruity in there. It's lovely. It reminds me a little bit of the kind of the smoothness of writer's tears, that kind of like
absolutely,
very easy to drink.
Can really see where you're coming from there with that. I actually get a little bit of grape on the nose as well. Kind of really soft, faint hints of spice in there as well. Definitely a lot of bourbon, a lot of tropical fruit, some mango as well.
You're an idiot. I'm like, cherries? Is there cherries? But there's probably not cherries.
I can taste that when you say it, but I feel like it's partly psychological.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's probably more psychological, all right. I wouldn't say cherries, but there's definitely some sort of a berry fruit in there.
Just
red fruit.
Go back to the cherries, Dan, just for a minute. Put it into a food. What food were you thinking of when you taste this?
Cherries.
Okay, we'll leave it at cherries.
I'm sorry. That was deliberately smart-assed. It was I don't know. I said like a kind of a biscuity, like a cherry biscuit of some like.
Yeah, but see,
dry like.
And the reason I asked that, right, and I wasn't trying to be smart with you either, right, was this, as I said in the beginning, we correlate food back to flavour, right? So a dry, biscuity, cherry flavour, right? So that would say there's a kind of a maltiness to it, probably. So you have a couple of flavours in there, right? So there's probably a maltiness and then a fruitiness that you associate with cherry, I would imagine.
So Pat O'Loughlin has absolutely nailed it. Bakewell tart.
Yeah, I just saw that actually.
Bakewell tart. That's exactly what I was thinking of.
That's actually a brilliant shout. I'd see Raymond Kennedy actually just asked a question about how much does a drop of water affect the flavor. It's basically it's to do with chemicals essentially. Think of whiskey as a chemical, think of water as a chemical. By diluting down, water is added to whiskey when it comes out of the cask. Otherwise, we'd be drinking 70% whiskey or 60% whiskey or so on and so forth. But when it's bottled, you add X amount of water to bring it down to the 46% or 43% or 40% whiskey. That's the desired strength of the bottle. And what that does is it changes the chemical makeup of the whiskey. So if you took Redbreast 12 cask strength and regular Redbreast 12, put them side by side, they're essentially the same whiskey. The cuts are taken the same. They're taken from the same set of stills and so on and so forth. But you see huge differences in the whiskey and not just the alcoholic components or the ABV of it. So by adding a little drop of water, what you're doing is just loosening down some of those chemicals, the esters and so on and so forth. You're getting rid of some of the alcohol that's in there because you are actually taking alcohol out by adding water, and it just makes it probably a little more palatable sometimes to drink. With this, literally, if you just put your finger into water and just do that, because you're only having 15 ml, that's more than enough, really, I would say, to have a whole new experience in the glass.
Yes, indeed. Only 15 mil.
I feel like people who really like white wine would probably really like this whiskey. Like people who drink maybe Chardonnay, that kind of thing. That's the kind of feeling I'm getting off it.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Yeah. We're just been asked, what about does the water have an effect, right? And yeah, 100%, right? I mean, there's two things I would say on it. Try to use room temperature water, because if you've got hot water or cold water, right, it will affect how you taste, same as you've got ice or hot food, right? So room temperature water is probably the best. The second thing, right, the water quality that you choose, right? If you can choose bottled water, still water, that's probably the best to go with. If you're in an area that's got good quality tap water, go with it. But I'd always say just maybe let it stand, let it sit for a little while, because what you'll see is it'll almost degas, and the oxygen and the chlorine will come out of it, and it's just a little bit better to taste with. Yep. But just as a rule of thumb, if the water tastes funny, if you're going to add it into the whiskey's going to taste funny too. So just as a general rule of thumb. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to number 2. So, right, we'll take a little bit of water, right? We'll get ourselves. Dan is looking very happy.
Will we reveal the whiskies at the end?
I think we should.
Okay.
Let's not spoil it for anyone.
Okay.
You know?
Perfect.
For anyone. Okay.
No adding yellow water. Nice.
Well, technically yellow water.
Again, right, I know I'm only looking at the clarity of it, right? I'm really not interested in the colour because I've stopped looking for colour at this stage. Again, I'm looking at the how it clings to the glass, i.e. the tears that are on it. You know, and it's you know what, it's about the same in terms of oiliness as the previous one, maybe a little bit more. And we're going to smell it. Wow. Now the aroma on this one. Well, I'm actually going to push this off to Emma actually, because Emma wants to try and talk about this one first because.
Ooh, it's really sharp. It's very kind of appley in aroma.
Yeah.
It's more of a kind of red apple, though, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Really kind of. I don't know, but there's a bit of bitterness in there as well. So
yeah,
that would send me toward green apple a bit.
What you think? What you think, Dan?
It's definitely a little oilier, just a little bit, not by much, but with the swirling test, it's there. I like the smell of it. It's sharp. There's definitely going to be I fear it a little bit. I'm a little bit afraid of the sharp going down, but I think it's okay. I'm going to embrace the fear.
And we're getting feedback. It's apples and vanilla. Yeah, I mean, I get that, right. Everything that you said, I think there is a touch of sherry in there.
I said there's a lot of sherry.
Yeah, and then it reminds me of almost like, I'm going to say, a stewed or an alcoholic plum, like you'd get with a what are those cakes called? Gee, so Black Forest Gatto. So the cherries and the plums you get with them. Absolutely.
I think there's definitely kind of a tropical fruit as well, though.
Mm.
For me,
this is my favorite so far, right?
I said,
you know,
there's a big, there's a big hint of cinnamon and ginger in there as well.
Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a Christmas time whiskey. You can almost imagine it with your Christmas pudding or something like that.
Tommy came across there. He wants to know what the ABV of all these are.
The first one was 46%.
Don't tell him. Reveal at the end. Tommy.
Well, I said it anyway, so. There's an awful lot of 46% whiskey out there, so. Star anise. Yeah, I'm not personally. I'm not getting that licorice style off it just yet. But perhaps actually maybe maybe it's smell a bit more. There's a bit more star anise in there.
Do you know what it kind of it reminds me of? And my mother used to bake cakes at Christmas years ago, and they were laced with sherry and fruit and all those good things, all those mixed spices. That's kind of the aroma that would be in the kitchen when we be doing it, you know.
Yeah, kind of almost marzipan-y kind of.
Yeah, I can definitely. Yeah. Will we move on to taste? I'm interested with this one.
Huge spice in there.
Yeah,
dominating. It's definitely a whiskey that could probably benefit with a slight touch of water, I think, in there.
Yeah, this one, I would say, yeah, I've actually put a little bit more than even I wanted because
it's very fiery.
Yeah,
it's good though. It's.
Do you remember those big red chewing gums years ago?
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting off of that. I remember being like 7 or 8, and you're allowed to pick a sweet from the shop, and I picked a packet of Big Red, and boy was I disgusted that Sunday morning.
I'm getting a big ginger nut, kind of ginger spice from it, but the sherry is definitely coming through, and then there's almost like a little bit of, there's a touch of honey sweetness, in there as well. And then there's kind of it's fruitiness. I wonder, is even I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of citrus fruit, maybe pineapple, maybe.
Mike McLaughlin, I'm with you 100%. There's a lovely bit of heat off it afterwards. Like it stays, the heat stays with you. It's perfect for Thomond Park and East Terrace.
Yeah, Michelle Learn International is dead on as well.
Thomond Park, East Terrace. Don't you mean the Mackey stand? I'm from a hand. There's no rugby in a hand.
Some Leonard has already described it as not a young Munster whiskey, which automatically makes me hate it now. But I don't want to because I like this. This is good.
Dan, I'd almost question the finish isn't that long. Right? It's kind of, I would consider that to be a kind of a short to medium finish on it. So it's not as
it's
you go
dry on the finish as well.
Yeah, it is. It's very dry on the finish, but you don't get that burn from it as it goes down. This sherry,
it's not going down. It's not going down. But after I've had it, I can feel that bit of heat in my chest after I've swallowed. Yeah. It's not burning going down. There's just that little bit of heat afterwards that I'm really, really enjoying.
Mm-hmm.
Someone keeps drinking my whiskies.
Yeah. So yeah, I said that one was definitely one that benefited from a nice drop of water because it was very, very spicy.
Which is actually quite surprising because generally when you have a whiskey that has as much sherry on this as this does, the flavour or the length of the whiskey should be elongated a lot more. And the finish should last with you for quite a longer time than what this does. Yeah, definitely as one of, I don't know who said it, Kennedy O'Brien said it here. The drop of water is definitely needed, just to tame the whiskey, tame down that cinnamon a bit, and just give it the depth that all those sort of rich dried fruits that are in the sherry component, give them the ability to come to the front.
Yes, I love it, lads.
I knew when we tasted this one, I kind of thought of you, right? Because I said that's probably the whiskey that Dan would go for.
That's right up my street now.
Yeah, and if you remember, Emma, the last time you were in with us, and we were talking about whiskey, and I said, was it red or white wine you were into? I suppose can you see the difference?
Yes.
What I was talking about between whiskey 1 and 2.
And to be honest, like when the red or white wine, I just thought that's a stupid question. But I see it. I see what you're talking about. That like that's two whiskeys poles apart in terms of flavour and in terms of finish. But like that's fantastic.
And they have been selected as number 1 and 2 to demonstrate our questioning of do you like red or white wine? Because I know some people kind of go, are we a little mad when we ask that? But it's kind of one of the reasons, See,
the part of the problem is that everyone already knows you're both mad. So when you ask questions like that, it comes with a kind of a health warning. Like they're both insane already. So is this just part of their crazy? Like,
yeah.
Listen, boy, a pub, you've got to be a little mad.
Yeah.
Okay, let's drive on, right? Let's drive on. John is asking, was it a bourbon cask finish? No, John, it wasn't.
No.
But we will come back to us.
Yeah.
We will come back to us. Okay.
I feel like I'm after eating a mouthful of cloves after that.
Yeah, I think a couple of commenters said that. I think Michelle and Kennedy and yourself is after saying it there now as well. There's definitely huge Christmas cake spice going on in that. Sorry there, I have to hunt the cat away from my whiskey.
Leave her off, sure. She can join us.
Him, the little bastard. Well, he has it.
So
as my grandmother would say, he has the tingling rather than the fanula.
Jesus. Right, moving swiftly along because we're only drinking 15 mils and we're on to number 3.
Yes, indeed. Only 15 mils.
So again, let's
drink aware.
This one, right? I'm going to say it was funny, right? When we got all these whiskies in, right? The day we got them in, it was quite cold outside. And we were taking the bottles out of the box, right? This one was a little cloudier than the others, and if you actually have a little look at it, it's a lot more hazy. Yeah, it's a little hazy, right? Which is kind of significant, and we'll talk about that as we go along. But when we were talking about clarity in the first two were very clear. This one isn't as clear. There's a touch of a haze to it. and that is important to note, right? As we look at the legs on it, there's definitely a good drop of oil in there. It's an oily whiskey.
Vincent Galooly's after coming in late there, so we're on to number 3, Vincent.
Surprise. Sorry, Vinny.
Just pour the first 3 into one glass, Vinny. You can catch up.
It's called a blend.
Okay, right. So this one definitely isn't as pronounced in aroma as the second one.
Leonard says it looks like a sample for Barrington's. Didn't want to say anything, but
Get yourself checked out if it's that hazy.
Just for the benefit of anyone on the call not from Limerick, Barrington's was a hospital here in town years and years ago. It's now, what's it called now?
Bon Secours.
Bon Secours, yeah. So it's you can draw your own conclusion from that.
Leonard, you need to hydrate more, kid.
Yeah.
it has a real kind of a smoky, I don't know, there's something kind of like peat fire sort of smell to it.
I can't say I get any of that, Emma, to be
No,
honest.
I can't
I'm
say I
just
get
losing
that.
my mind
Yeah,
sometimes.
no, you're
I'm having
you're
a stroke.
If you smell toast and have a bad feeling in your left arm, I'd say get your man there to bring you to the Bon Secours straight away.
If I keep saying cherries, will it eventually be true?
No, it'll never be true.
Not on this one either, no. So this one, right? I'm getting a nice bang of vanilla from it. I'm getting a bit of banana and almost like there's definitely spice there, but it's not overpowering. And there's also a kind of a sweetness that reminds me of caramel. It's actually really nice. Of the 3, it's probably the most subtle of the 3, and probably for me, it's probably the most complex of the 3.
Like, I think you're getting a vanilla, but it's a kind of more of a sweet vanilla.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, like you're describing it really well, because I wouldn't have found the words, but that's exactly what it is. It's like a kind of a sweet vanilla kind of a thing.
I've been off
That's a great house. That's a
It's
great
almost like
house.
outside. He smells smoke.
a bergamot orange sort of flavour come through.
You're definitely getting the banana anyway from the banana.
Yeah, definitely a lot of banana in there as well. Again, really tropical.
Hang on, I'm going to say, right, Vinny's just saying his mother is sitting beside him looking after him, right? Actually, just Paddy Galooly, if you're there beside Vincent, happy birthday. Vincent's dad is 60 yesterday. It's just a big happy birthday to you. Until we meet again. I should stop waving my hand because the camera's going to start moving again.
It's almost like custard cream biscuits.
But they're on fire.
No. Absolutely not.
I can't.
Maybe you left them near the toaster.
You might want to just check your cooker.
Yes. Have you a carbon monoxide
here
alarm?
now. Sam Windrum said it's like, what did he say? Where's
Coffee
Sam
by the
Windrum
fire.
gone? Yeah.
Yeah.
And Declan Rinn said he can smell the smoke too. So I'm not going mad. It's in there.
Lads,
You're wrong.
Limerick is burning. Just look out your windows. It's on fire.
It's a beautiful sunset, actually.
Ooh, that's the fire.
Let's taste, sorry.
I was a bit depressed when you said let's taste it. I'm finishing my glass.
Okay. For me, the banana is definitely the nice bang of banana off it. Again, nice bang of vanilla. I mean, in fairness, the aroma, the smell on it is mimicking the taste almost. A little bit of. I'm gonna say not peanut, but
for me, there's a lot of earthiness in it. It's almost reminiscent of an Armagnac. Like if you're talking to a whiskey head and they're talking about old school whiskey warehouses, there's a thing called a dunnage warehouse, which is a warehouse that doesn't have a concrete floor, it just has a flattened earth floor that the casks are let on. And just whatever a dunnage warehouse does to a whiskey, that's the feeling I get off of this. It's that earthy, rustic style of vibe that I'm feeling at it. Again, like I said earlier on the nose, there's a lot of tropical fruits going on there as well. A lot of orange, bergamot, pineapple as well in there.
It's kind of a chocolatey kind of a.
Yeah, it actually is. Yeah, cocoa bean.
I've added a drop of water to, right? And what it reminds me of, I'll tell you the level that we got to in terms of our whiskey nerdness. Like we have a beautiful tea shop up the road from us on Wickham Street, tobacco and tea, and we go for a walk up there every now and then just to smell it, to smell the tea leaves and the tobacco and that kind of stuff and the leather, right? Because they're all terms that are used in whiskey. But as I'm smelling it, and even as I added the water and tasting it, I'm almost getting a black tea kind of taste of it. It follows through with I get it with certain red wines as well. It's like the tannins that are in the red wine, and it's kind of that little bit of bitterness in the center of the tongue. And I can't really explain it other than saying it's like if you were to go like talk like that. It's just right in the middle. Anyone else think they're going to get a little bit of black tea, or am I smelling?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah. There's definitely a herbal sort of tea flavor there. All right.
Well, Joris come in instead of kind of a burnt brown sugar.
Mm.
Kind of caramel, yeah.
Yeah, kind of caramel.
Yeah, I would agree. Zinfandel, Dave O'Connor.
That's a big shout.
Yeah.
I'd be very surprised if anyone actually guesses the finish that's on this whiskey, because yeah. Throw out some weird and random finishes up there on the chat there, because I'd be really surprised if anyone actually guesses the finish that's on this whiskey.
What do you mean by finish?
So basically, whiskeys are the vast majority of whiskey is aged in bourbon casks or ex-bourbon casks. So like we say, Jameson, for example, would take bourbon casks over from Jefferson's now. So they use casks from Jefferson's Reserve over in Kentucky to bring those in, and they age their whiskey in it. But then they'll also use other like wine casks, generally wine casks, to finish their whiskeys. So you'll have maybe a 2-year finish or a 3-year finish, or even just a 6-month finish. So for example, Jameson Caskmates, which would be a prime example, it uses all the same casks that regular Jameson does, but it then uses a 6-month extra finish in a stout cask or the IPA cask, depending on which one you're drinking. Then you have other whiskies that are full-term maturation, so it could be matured in all sherry or just all bourbon or even all port or red wine. The list is essentially endless. If you want to get really nerdy about things, in Irish whiskey law, we're allowed to be a lot more experimental compared to the Scots. So in the Irish whiskey technical file, you're allowed to actually use any type of wood you want, as long as it's not poisonous, to age your whiskey. Whereas in Scottish whiskey, in their technical file, it actually specifies that it must be oak. So when it says it must be oak, that really limits the amount of things that you can use then to finish or flavour your whiskey.
Right.
That was a very nerdy answer to it, right?
Sorry.
No, I loved it.
Yeah, it was
That's
great.
good stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to condense it into copyright law, right? Copyright law. So the finish is the difference between having to pay copyright and not. So finish means it's only a snippet, so I don't have to pay you. Whereas if I put it in for the full amount, I've got to give it the royalties. Does that make sense?
Actually, less sense than Colm's original explanation.
Right.
Basically, Irish whiskey's better.
That's coming from the man that is selling Scotch.
I sell every whiskey under the sun. I'd sell my mother if I could.
Oh, she could be listening. Let's be careful.
I'm going to share this video with her.
Let's move on to number 4, right? The fourth sample. Again, let's remember we're taking a little bit of water as we're going along. Clean the palate, stay hydrated. Very important as we're doing this. Hydration is definitely key.
So when you say we can take a few more liberties with how whiskies are finished, can you put them in a box that used to hold oranges, like?
Yes.
Class.
You could I actually know.
Yeah, you could.
A nice thing, Emma, is cask mitts. So think of cask mitts, right? So cask mitts is basically, for all intents and purposes, is a beautiful whiskey that comes from Jameson, and then they put it in. They've geared up, or they bought now 8 Degrees, and
Yeah, I've seen those.
they put it into barrels that have held stout or IPA, and then they have a whole other range. And the barrel that they put it into, the taste is transferred across, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, just as an upsell while we're here, right, we're in growler business, right? So at the moment, we're currently pouring a beer from Kinnigar, right? And it's a whiskey conditioned pale rye. A pale rye as a style of beer has very little flavour in it, right? It's not as flavoursome as the others, right? It's a very simple and sometimes a boring beer, right? So they put the pale rye into whiskey barrels, and like the cask mitts, they were expecting the flavours to move back and forth, and the whiskey barrels to get new flavours and the beer to get new flavours, right? But because the pale rye was so blank, it sucked all the flavour out of the whiskey barrel, and when they tried to use it to make whiskey, they decided they couldn't sell it because there was really no flavour left. You know? So
I just like to say thanks to Declan Rinn for saying he loves the nerding too. So thanks, Declan.
we can get as nerdy as we want, but there's lots of people at the call. I suppose, yeah. So again, right, any flavours that you have in the barrel or in the wood should technically be transferred at some rate or degree to the whiskey. Okay, let's move on to number 4. So, right.
Just before we go on, I'm actually just looking through the chat there, and actually one person did get the finish.
We didn't get the
That person just yet what they're going. You can send it down. You can send it down, Colm, and we'll give it to her.
Oh, it's in the post already.
Was it the Marsala one?
We'll tell you later.
We'll tell you later. There's about 5 or 6 there.
Okay, so
It's definitely not the gin anyway.
on to number 4, right? Before Dan gets giddy. Again,
Oh my God.
lovely clarity to this one, right? I'm actually going to say this one is somewhat deceptive in terms of the oiliness. As we swirl it, you think it's probably less oily than it is. But the reason that is that it's probably the most oily of the whiskies we've had right now. And just let it stand and you'll see beautiful, beautiful legs on it. And beautiful tears coming down along it. But it's deceptive because it's so viscous that it clings to that glass a little bit stronger, right? And that is definitely a hint as to what it is, right? Definitely a hint. Aroma wise, you know what? There's a. You mentioned marzipan earlier on. I'm wondering, are you getting it now?
Yeah, definitely. But there's something else as well, like pineapple. No, not pineapple. I can't.
Cherries? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It's almondy. It's a almond kind of a.
Yeah, definitely a nutty flavour going on there.
Yeah, dark brown sugar, that muscovado kind of sugar. Declan, kind of.
Excellent, yeah, that's yeah. I mean, I'm almost getting I'm getting a toasted wood kind of a aroma to this one, and a little bit of that kind of citrus, kind of maybe the orange peel, not the orange itself, but the peel when you squeeze the zest and you get a little bit the shot of oil comes out, that kind of that kind of product. But I'm also getting, which is a bit unusual, right, a little bit of green banana in the background on it.
Yeah.
But it's.
You're not supposed to eat them when they're green, Mike.
You can smell them.
You can not eat them. Yeah, thanks, Evan. Tell him.
Just going around Super Value, sniffing the green bananas.
If you were sniffing green bananas in Supermax, now you're on one hell of a
Doing
Friday
Supermax
night.
wrong.
I will take whatever you're having.
Okay, let's move before we get too giggly into tasting it. Okay, there's definitely a big kick of spice on this one, and a big kick of vanilla.
And no, it's not red breast. Just
this one, I'm actually going to say this one really would benefit from a drop of water.
Vinny Gilhooly says it's creamy on the top. Yeah, there's definitely like a cream element to it, I'd say, all right.
I think he's drinking the wrong whiskey, I think.
He's not
Vinny,
wrong, though.
If
He
your
just has his
whiskey
own
is-
bottle and he's just pouring it into glass.
If your whiskey is black and creamy on top, you're not drinking the right whiskey.
Picked up the wrong glass.
Okay, so before we descend into madness, there's an element of marshmallow coming through it for me.
Yeah.
Little bit of
You're definitely getting the marzipan.
yeah, that banana is still there. There's a little bit of woodiness to it. I'm almost going to say this. It's like roasted almonds, maybe.
Yep. Yeah, I think someone said amaretto earlier. They're fairly spot on there with that.
Yeah. You know,
It's kind of all I can. Well, it's not all I can taste, but it's the strongest flavor in it. Is that almondy amaretto kind of a flavor to it? Very smooth.
For me, it's what whiskey actually used to taste like. If you've ever tasted anything from the 60s or early 70s, it's really reminiscent of something from that era. It's very rich, powerful, sort of sticks to the roof of your mouth. A lot of spice in there as well. It's very reminiscent of something that's, I don't know what the correct word I'm looking for is. Something that's almost dirty, dusty.
Rustic and traditional.
Yeah, that's the word. Yeah.
I just
me in the English language have never gotten on well.
I just want to point something out, right? So anyone that's looking at the screen, right, you're going to see Colm has his glass empty, but he keeps going back in to nose it, right? And the reason he's doing that is that even when the glass is empty, right, you still have a certain amount of the oiliness is still adhering to the glass. And what you have is you're going to have like the
esters.
Volatile esters, will come off at a various degree, right? The esters, right, liquid. The esters are basically oil, right? They hate water, right? But we force them to mix with it. So when it's gone, when the water's gone, you have the oil left inside, and that's what you're getting. You have the esters. The esters are what give it the smell and the flavor. And sometimes you can get a better nose on a whiskey after the glass is empty than you can when it's full, and that's just because the aroma is that little bit more subtle than it would have been when you had a full glass there. If that makes sense. You're not overpowered. You're not blinded. That makes sense?
David O'Connor makes a great point there. It's that it's still, even after a touch of water, that it's still quite oily, which it definitely is. It really maintains its texture and its and the body of the whiskey really, really well.
It's the most oily of the four thus far, right?
Definitely the most viscous, the heaviest whiskey we've had so far.
Yeah, hands down. Okay, let's move on. Let's move on to 5. Let's have a drop of water in between, Dan.
Buchaldana.
To be fair, samples 1 to 4 are all empty, so that's probably a good shout.
So I was going to say, Dan, if you keep this up now, you're going to be put into the waiting room. It's our version of the bowl step. Okay, number 5, right? Fifth of the 6, right? We're almost to the end. This one, right? For me, this one is it's definitely different from the first 4. There's a little bit more of the kind of that woodiness to it. Little bit. It's a different type of spice. So the others were spicy, but not the same as this. Element of honey to it. Almost like
I think you're kind of getting nearly a sweet kind of syrup.
I was thinking like a simple sugar syrup you'd make for cocktails. That kind of coming off it. And I'm almost getting like I want to bite into it like a toffee apple kind of from it. But there's something there, right? That I cannot.
Pencil shavings.
Yeah.
Pencil shavings. There you go. I was trying to.
But also hairspray.
Yeah. Like there's a borderline acetone you know when you walk through Pennies and they're doing the nails and you're like, my Jesus, my nose.
Perfume has been turned up. Perfume, yes.
It is a very sharp smell, like so
Pat has it
sharp.
plum.
It's hard to pick out what the other flavors are because the first thing
Lynx
that hits you
Africa.
is this.
I'd say more sure now myself, to be honest.
It's kind of got a red wine type smell to it.
Like a cheap red wine, I think.
Like a burgundy maybe.
No, not a burgundy, no.
No? I'm getting that kind of sweetness and that kind of plum taste.
I would say it's kind of like petrol station red wine. So that kind of
Bodes well for tasting it.
those cheap Chilean imports.
yeah. And I'm going to say I'm not knocking it, right? So for the benefit of what we're doing here, it's good to taste all these things, right? So that's what it reminds me of. Okay, go ahead.
Go on. No, as a connoisseur of cheap Chilean wine, it's I can see where you're coming from.
Okay, let's taste this one. Wow.
Getting kind of like a very sugary, like sugar cane kind of. I don't know if you've ever tried the like Peruvian like untreated pure liquor, like the what was it called? Not pisco. Pisco? Yeah, getting kind of a vague taste of that off it.
That's actually a wonderful description of it, I think. I was thinking almost like overripe grapes.
Yep.
You know, that kind of pisco. Yeah, good. Jesus, that's a great. But I'm getting a bit of pear, kind of a pear, like a stewed kind of a pear.
Yeah, poached pear, green apple.
Yeah, there's definitely vanilla in it.
There's a spice in it. There's a kind of I don't know, there's a kind of an oaky kind of woody kind of.
Definitely a woody texture to it, all right.
Yeah.
It's actually this has been number 5. I'm just calibrating for myself. This is probably the woodiest of the 5 for me. You know.
Yeah.
And
that'll be the pencil shavings that they finish it in, I'd say.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's matured in a 2B cask.
Unexpectedly kind of fruity, considering the first smell of it feels wrong, but the taste of it's actually quite fruity.
It's actually a lovely lemon citrus going through it, almost like a lemon drizzle cake style thing.
So I'm going to say, right, this is one that, if I'm being quite fair, right, I wouldn't normally drink this type of whiskey, and just by virtue of the style that it is, but this is really good. That'll make more sense as we explain what they are.
We'll actually be very surprised, Jack.
Yeah, I think people will be
what this one is.
Elaine Vaughan said it's rummish. In a way, I can see where you're coming from. Like it's got that sharpness that like a French style rum would have, like something from like a Clement rum, like a rum agricole, that sort of free run sugarcane style rum, which is actually a really good shout. Grappa is another great shout from Tommy Doyle.
I think we're definitely getting the grape through it. Like, yeah. Just on that, Elaine, we're also doing a blind rum tasting on the 2nd of April, if you want to join in.
We'll all be blind after it.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay, let's move on. Let's take in a bit of water, folks, just to make sure we try and stay a bit hydrated, because we're going through quite a lot.
That's given me, actually, the pisco taste off that has given me a bit of PTSD, if I'm honest.
You want to tell us more, because we can't just end on that.
We were trekking in the jungle in Peru about 6 years ago, thereabouts, and wound up at a bar doing shots of pisco. And we, at one point in the trek, we were chewing coca leaves. We had our mouths full of coca, and then they gave us pisco, and they gave us another drink that had a snake dead in it as well, or the snake was alive, and it was part of the venom of the snake or something was part of the potency of the alcohol. It was just very dark. Kennedy got punched in the face.
I was going to say, were they trying to kill you?
No, it wasn't the guides. Just one of our group was very punchy. It was fun. His name was Timba?
El Chapo.
Something like that.
They're feeding you steak chips. And then trying to feed you.
Yeah.
Standard in Peru.
To be honest, I think you're pretty lucky to be alive.
We really are.
Yeah.
Okay, sample 6, last one of the evening. Let's have a little go of it. Let's see what we think.
Kennedy, you did not deserve it.
He didn't, in fairness.
This one is a little bit interesting. I'm definitely getting butterscotch, white pepper almost. You know, like the cheap Saxo white pepper you cook with at home. You get a little white jar of.
I think you're kind of getting a pear, a ripish pear.
I'm at that time of the night where everything smells a bit like acetone to me now.
Well, just on that note, stick your nose into your elbow and give a little sniff. I'm not joking yet, right? Right, and like a rabbit, right? Do you ever see a rabbit when they sniff? It's kind of like three sharp sniffs. Yeah, try that, and it should help you.
Do I do that in the elbow or the whiskey?
Do it in your elbow to begin with.
If you can do it on your bare skin, it's better.
I don't have any bear skin. Where am I meant to get bear skin at this time of night?
In the jungle with your pisco. But yeah.
Back of your hand, maybe back of your hands. Back your hand, yeah. Now try.
Still getting that kind of hairspray kind of.
Well, wash your
but
hair.
like really nice hairspray, like salon hairspray.
Well,
which I often want to drink, so.
Well, I can think so. Yeah, I can get where you're from. But I wonder, is it kind of like that sweet scent that kind of you get from like butterscotch, maybe?
Yeah, it's possibly the kind of smells they put into hairsprays to make them smell nice.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Is there a kind of a very subtle kind of a fruity, like a fruit that's not overpowering taste-wise, like a grapefruit or something? Is there?
Yeah.
Not as strong, not like the bananas. The stuff that was banana smelling was really banana smelling. This is.
Let me get an apple.
This is much more subtle, fruity kind of smell.
I wouldn't say no, Dan. Yeah, if you're getting it, it's there. You know, that's.
By the way, watermelon was in my head, and also the best fruit to say in a Limerick accent.
Watermelon.
Watermelon. Watermelon.
Okay, let's move on to it. So let's taste it. Tommy Doyle is saying old Irish pot still. No, Tommy.
That's lovely.
Nice try though. I'd love an old Irish pot still.
And just in case anyone, I can say that to Tommy, right? Because Tommy is into his whiskies, and we often have debates about whiskey. So I'm allowed to say that too.
Yeah, it does. Patrick and Anne says it tastes like a toffee apple or smells like a toffee apple. I can kind of get that.
Yeah, I definitely get that. That's an excellent shout.
Yeah. You know, and is anyone getting like there's like a little bit of spiciness in there, that white pepper, but touch like it's almost like cinnamon, like a Cinnabon kind of cinnamon sweetness. Yeah, you know, and fruitcake, definitely a little bit of fruitcake.
Yeah,
a lot of toasted oak.
Dave is right as well. It starts sweet and then it's like ninja burn creeps in.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm almost kind of going to say it's kind of reminding me of number 3 a little bit. I
don't have kind of the pepper. It's the pepper on the tongue, I think.
Remember we were talking about the center of the tongue, like you get the kind of like I don't know how to describe it, like the tannins, like the black tea. But I'm not getting the black tea on it, but I'm getting the sensation right in the center of the tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Cinnamon jawbreakers. Yeah, that's the aftertaste is that. Yeah.
Okay, right. So we're gonna give everyone a little bit of a minute to sip on that one, right? And I'm going to just for fun, right? I'm just going to ask you what's your favorite, most favorite, and least favorite, but don't type anything yet, right? Because you'll see why. It should pop up on your screen.
Ooh, that's fancy.
Fancy.
So you should be able to just click on it. Now I can't see what you're seeing because it's. So if you want to just click on which one you think was your favorite and which one you think was your least favorite, And I think what we'll do, Colm, then is we'll reveal the least favourite first,
Mhm.
the most favourite last, just because we can.
Perfect.
Yeah, but like, I know nobody's going to pick my favorite one, but I still think it
That's
was the
because you're
best
wrong.
one.
That's because you're wrong.
God damn it, Colm.
It's like a drama at Murrayfield, Redbreast. Packs a similar pinch or punch, I presume, to sample 2.
Whoever said that, I kind of agree with that. I liked number 2 was my favorite.
Yeah.
And there was that bit of spice and that bit of heat, and I think this has that as well. It's got a lovely little punch to it when you're tasting it. Number 2 and number 6 are for me anyway, alone. Just that.
That voice is definitely both of them, all right, Jack.
Yeah.
Number 2. So yeah, we'll do that, right? So just Dan, like number 2 and number. Which one is your favorite, Dan? Which one was your favorite of the?
I went with number 2, right? But it was a toss up between 2 and 6 because there's quite a bit of punch to it. Quite a not too much heat. I don't like too much heat, but enough that you know what you're drinking. Like you have a sup. It's enjoyable. There's plenty of flavour to it, and just enough of a kick in it to be that. Yes, I am drinking. And yes, and the warmth as well, and that's the same thing with the warmth as well. So yeah, I know I'm drinking a nice, strong, flavorful, tasty whiskey. 2 or 6 were for me anyway. My
And what was your least favorite then?
number 3, and not that it was lacking anything. I just didn't think that it was a fine whiskey. You know, if you got a glass of it and you had it, you'd be going great, but you wouldn't be asking the barman, Jesus, what's that? I'd have another drop of that, please. It was fine. It was a good whiskey, but nothing about it made me think, Jesus, I'd have more of that, you know?
Okay. Emma, same question to you. What was your favourite and what was your least favourite?
I put 2 down as my favourite, but it was between 2 and 1. Now, there's every chance that's just, you try something, you like it, and then everything after that isn't as good.
Yeah.
But I just found they stayed with me, and number 2 I picked as my favourite because it has lovely, happy memories. It tasted festive. It was warming. It was easy to drink. I really liked it.
Yeah.
So.
And your least favourite then?
I put down number 5 because of the PTSD.
That's a perfect reason. Colm, what are you thinking, pal?
Favorites were between 4 and 5, but I went for number 5. Now, obviously, I know what all the whiskies are, so I'm sort of suffering from preconceived notions of what each one is. And having drank them all before in different sittings, it's sort of hard to differentiate between them. I can't remember what I think I said number 2 or 6 was the worst. I can't even remember now at this stage. Not that they were the worst, but it was just I wasn't feeling them.
I have to fight you, Colm.
Come here,
that's the way.
Your face, that floor, kid. All right.
Let's do it.
I'll say
Pick a window. You're going through it.
Yeah, exactly. See
Let's do it.
your face, boy.
Okay.
2 hits. Me hitting you, you hitting the ground.
I mean, third hit, you hitting the floor.
We'll share the results, so right. So the most favourite of the group on, right, and this 50 on, was number 2, and the least favourite was number 5.
Interesting.
You're all heathens, every last one of you.
So let's go to the least favourite. Do you want to grab it? James is going to grab it now. Hopefully the camera doesn't fly.
Probably will. Can't wait.
Well, right. So the least favourite, right, is number 5. It's a Scotch by the name of Glengoyne. It's a 12-year-old Scotch, but it's.
So no wonder Colm loved it.
It's a very interesting one, right? And if you know, right, I said it's a style that I don't particularly like in general, but this one kind of has swayed me to change my ways, right? So it's a single malt, all right, mostly ex-bourbon barrels. It's 43% ABV and it's 12-year-olds. I have to say, for most of us when we think of Scotch, right, we really do think of the peatiness, that kind of earthiness, you know, and I'm going to, for want of a better word, right, what we call the phenols, but what would be, if you've ever put TCP in your mouth, that's the taste, right? That's what you get.
Yeah. It's very much a preconceived notion that most people have about Scotch. If you've ever done the Jameson tour or any Irish whiskey distillery tour, they always go, all Irish whiskies triple distilled, all Scotch whiskies double distilled, and you know, all Scotch whiskey smoky. It couldn't be further from the truth. Glengoyne is actually, to my mind, is probably the most beautiful distillery in the world. It's absolutely gorgeous. There's a show on Netflix called The Still Game about two old fellas running around Glasgow just getting up to no good. But one of the episodes is actually filmed in Glengoyne, so you actually get to see part of the distillery in that show. But there's great information available about it. It's actually right on the border of the highland, lowland regions. So the actual distillery part of the distillery part of the distillery is actually in the Highland region, and literally across the road is the warehouse, and the road is the A81, and that's actually classed as the lowland region of Scotland. So it's the only whiskey that I know of in Scotland that's both Highland and lowland. It's absolutely stunning. I have to say, and as well as that, it actually has 3 stills as well. So that just proves the point as well.
Colm, can I ask, do you think that some of this comes from the most readily available and the most kind of well-known scotches that are so, like, for example, like most whiskey drinkers know Lafroig?
Yeah, most people know Bowmore, or they know, sorry, I'm just picking out of my cabinet, Ardbeg, which are probably 2 of the most well-known Scotch whiskies in the world, and they're absolutely fabulous. Now, both of those distilleries are based in an island called Fheile, which is about 15-20 miles off the coast of Northern Ireland. If you're at Giant's Causeway, you can basically see it on a clear day. What most of the people see is, you know, if any of your fans of Ron Swanson,
Lagavulin.
Yeah, Lagavulin, exactly. You know, Lagavulin follows is the same, and a lot of that is to do with the as Mike and James said, the phenols that are based in the soil. Those whiskies get a lot of press. They're hugely well known, but of course they're owned by huge companies. Like for example, Ardbeg is owned by Moet Hennessy, which are the champagne company, and yeah, exactly, that's the word I was looking for. I should know that. So you know, they've huge outreach throughout the world and so on and so forth. But like the likes of Glengoyne is actually owned by an independent bottler, or what used to be an independent bottler called Ian MacLeod, and that's actually their only distillery as far as I know. So while they're quite a small distillery in most people's eyes, they only produce like 1 million litres of alcohol per year. Jameson or Middleton, they produce that in about 1.5 days to put it on the scales. Yeah. Each pot still in Middleton will hold 11,000 litres of alcohol or so, and they have like 12 of them.
So Middleton, not very rare then.
Hey,
insider jokes.
Okay. So there was a question. How common are triple distilled scotches, Colm?
Actually, very common. Well, I wouldn't say very common, but a lot more common than what you think. Probably one of my most favourite distilleries in the world is from the Campbelltown region, which is, if you look past Fheile, is the next region of Scotland that is closest to Ireland. If anyone's ever heard of Springbank or Hazelburn or Longrow, those three brands of whiskey are all made in the same distillery called Springbank. The Hazelburn range, which is completely unpeated, is triple distilled. Springbank range, which has a small degree of peat, is 2.5 times distilled. And then the Longrow, which is a very peated version, is 2 times distilled. So there's a multitude of triple distilled whiskies out there. If you're ever in Glasgow, you can go do the Auchentoshan tour. Say that 5 times really quickly after 10 pints. And their whiskies are triple distilled, mainly because of the Irish contingent to move to that area of Glasgow. And they continue to triple distill their whiskies almost as a taste for home for Irish labourers and workers that move to Scotland to rebuild or to build Glasgow as it was fast becoming a major city.
There was a really good question thrown in there into the chat that I think needs answering from James, Mike, and from you, Colm.
Yeah. Which one?
If you're not going to have a top shelf, right? Don't go top shelf. But what's your go-to dram at home?
For me personally, if I was stuck on a desert island, I think my go-to whiskey would be a Redbreast 12. Previously, it would have been this one, which is a Scottish whiskey called Benriach. Benriach 12-year-old. This used to be available for €40, €45. It is an entirely all sherried whiskey, and this is the last bottle I know of in Ireland, and I'm holding onto it for special occasions because this thing is absolute magic juice, and I bought it for like €40.
Cool.
So in answer to John's question, yeah, Redbreast 12 is definitely one of my go-tos. But I'm going to say you can't drink that every day because it is a little bit expensive, right? So probably the one that I have at home in the cabinet, right? That I would go to quite regularly at the moment, and it's a combination of quality and price. It would be the West Cork Distillery Bourbon Cask.
That's a very good shout. That's a very good shout.
And if you keep an eye out in the off licenses, O'Brien's, what I don't like saying Lidl or Aldi, have a look there as well. A bottle of it at the moment is in and around 23 to 24 euros at the moment, and for quality and value, the money is probably one of the best that I like anyway.
Yeah. Funny enough, this Ardbeg I bought, it's a 5-year-old called Wee Beastie, which I really like the name of. Really heavily peated Ardbeg. I actually picked this up for €45. It's an absolute bargain, I have to say.
Well, John, I'm actually going to agree with you. I was going to say 12-year-old Redbreast as well, but the Blackbush is definitely for a price point.
Absolute shout. Absolute shout.
It's I mean, it's there.
Couldn't agree more.
It's the one.
Okay, come. We'll drive on a small. So that was the least favourite was sample number 5. That was the Glengoyne 12-year-old. Okay, next one is sample number 3. I'm going to say I really like this one. This would have been my number 1. I'm actually quite disappointed. And it's local enough. Yeah, it's a Napoleon Castle. It's a 12-year-old. Laurie Griffin, you got it 100% right. It is a Marsala cask.
Yeah, well done.
Very distinctive. It's predominantly in bourbon barrels, and then in the Marsala casks, it's 46%. And the reason why I was kind of talking about the little bit of opacity or the little bit of I don't want to say cloudiness, but lack of clarity, was that like it's a whiskey that says it's non-chill filtered. And as I said, the day that we brought it in, you could actually really see that with the bottles, in that it was very, very, very opaque almost. There was a translucence to it, which was fantastic, right? And again, the Pope Castle, it's only out the road, lads. It's as local as local could be. Okay, when we move on, number 4, we'll work our way up with sample number 2. This one actually, you know what? This one is quite an interesting one because it's the Riders' Tears and it's the Redhead single malt.
Was 4 number 2?
Yeah, sample number 2 came in 4th, right?
I thought sample number 2 came in first. Sorry, I must have had that actually.
Did I say it was number?
Sample number 2 came in as number 1, most favourite. Sorry, I'll read this way. Actually, do you know what I'm going to say, right? Hang on. The votes don't tally. No, I was reading
Stop the count.
I was reading which is your least favorite. Hang on, stop. Let's
Yeah.
just go back again. Go back.
Oh, Jesus. It's all gone Pete on.
We're okay, right? Number 5, the Glengoyne was the least favorite. Number 3,
It's a fix.
Tommy Doyle is very right there. That Napog is not very local. He's right because it's actually distilled in Bushvilles.
No, you're really good. Listen, come on, get it away, go away. The podcast is beautiful stuff. Sorry. Number 1 is the next least favorite. And number 1 is the Teelings single grain. It's from Cooley Distillery. Beautiful single grain. Interesting with this one. I think it's 5-year-old Colm. 46%.
Yeah, it's an unaged statement, but it's generally considered about a 5 to 6 year old.
Yeah.
Shut it up again, man. Shut it up again.
Who is talking? Okay, and then it's actually it's aged in Cabernet wine casks. So I know, or wine barrels. I know we were talking about it. You know, I mean, you kind of mentioned white wine with this one. So there is definitely wine. It's definitely wine casks, but yeah, there is an influence to it.
Colin, would you say I have a calling?
Do you know what? I see a bright future.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Bright future. Yeah.
Next one is number 6. This is probably the wild card of the whiskies that are there. Number 6 is a Michter's Sour Mash. It's an American whiskey.
I was going to say it was finished in a sour's cask or something.
No, so there's a lot. Every whiskey in the world is sour mashed.
Yeah.
Whether you know it or not. So what sour mash is, it's basically called a thing called setback, where they hold part of the previous fermentation, which is the bit where the yeast converts the sugars into alcohol, and keeps them back and puts them into the next batch of the fermentation as well. And that just keeps everything regular. Every whiskey in the world has some sort of a sour mash or setback element onto it. But to a marketer or someone who designs labels, sour mash just sounds sort of cool.
Right.
Okay. The second most favorite or second most liked whiskey was number 4, and that is actually the Powers 3 Swallows, right? Pot still whiskey, very very Irish, ex-bourbon cask with some Oloroso sherry casks. There's no age statement on this one either. It's 40%. It's non-chill filtered. Anyone who's into their kind of redbreast probably would see similarities between the redbreast and the 3 Swallows. So it definitely exists. It's one, right? I'm actually going to say it's one that for some reason people avoid in bars. I don't know why. There seems to be kind of a misconception about it or a dislike for it.
Yeah, it just falls into a weird category, though, doesn't it? You know, it's like, I'm going to say something terrible, right? If you don't feel like buying a Redbreast 12, that is definitely the next best. I think it's an incredible whiskey. To be honest, like I said there when we were tasting it, it's a real throwback to what the old, like, if anyone's ever lucky enough to taste the old gold label from the 60s or 70s before it became the blend, like, that was a fabulous whiskey, and that's what that tastes like. It's a really, really good throwback to old school Irish whiskey.
It is, and in fairness, it was a recipe that was brought back to life.
Yep.
So it wasn't produced for many years. I think was it 2009, 2008, 2009, something along.
No, 2013 is when it or 2013 or 14 when it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2010, so they started making it.
To go halves of it, but yeah, no, it's a fabulous whiskey, I have to say. But if anyone wants to really nerd out on whiskey, if you look at the RTE archives online through the player or however they have them, you can actually see some of the stuff that the old Powers distillery had going on. There's a great video of like a news broadcast going on while the lads are cleaning out a mash tun or cleaning out the malting house, and they're all just standing there in their jocks in this 100-degree heat, and the grey, the white fronts that are now grey, and the lads are shoving it over their shoulders and all that. It's brilliant to see. But like
I mean, does that get into the whiskey somehow?
It does, yeah. It's Odo body. Yeah, it's Odo sweat. It's actually brilliant. The history of the Powers Distillery is fabulous. It's really, really cool. Like in 1885 to 1887, a fella called Sir Alfred Barnard traveled around Ireland, and at the time Ireland had like 70 or 80 or 90 distilleries at the time, and he wrote about every distillery and spent time there and so on. But the most column inches in his book was dedicated to Powers. It was so big, it took 16 acres of land in around Dublin, and like they had their own horse hospital, their own fire brigade. It was huge. It was class. But even the roofs of the warehouse had soil on top of them, so the farmers that were labouring there or whatever could actually grow their own veg to eat and everything. So it was like an inner city urban garden before they ever became millennium or whatever the word is.
Okay, so we're getting comments on the white fronts, blood, sweat and tears, essential ingredients. Yeah, we won't talk about Guinness because if you ever visit the Guinness storehouse, you'll see the old vats they used to have. Like it took 3/4 of an hour to an hour to get to the top. And once you were up, you didn't come back down. So take that from what you will.
Yeah. But if anyone is ever in Dublin on Thomas Street and John's Lane is where the Powers Distillery entrance was, which is the National College of Art and Design now. You can actually go into the National College of Art and Design and see the 3 original pot stills that John Power and his sons had set up for the distillery, which is pretty cool. And it's really strange that they're still in existence because we all know the price of copper.
Yeah, so that it's a Powers 3 Swallows. It's the new label that's on it. But the whiskey is still the same. We will put a picture of all of these up, and we'll say that the numbers, number one being the Teelings right through to number 6. So the last whiskey, which was the most favourite, and I have to say, right, it's a cracking little whiskey, and it's one I probably wouldn't have gone for myself. The lads convinced me to include it, and it's very apt for Paddy's Day.
And Dan would cry if we didn't have it in, you know?
Yeah. So it is Writer's Tears, but it is Writer's...
number 2?
Yeah.
Number 2.
Yeah.
Is that the one I said was Writer's Tears?
Yeah, you asked.
Yes, you did.
Instead of,
Langford, knock it out of the fucking park, Langford.
Yes!
You're knocking it out
a
of the
bright
park.
future. I said it, a bright future.
But it is Writer's Tears Redhead. So for Paddy's Day, we have
like redheads.
Redhead. Has to be a token redhead.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Did you put that into my emergency last week?
No. Which one? You got a Teelings. You got a Teelings. Number 1.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah. So the Writer's Tears Redhead. It's a beautiful single malt, 46%. No age statement to it. It's non-chilled. It's number 2. And it's aged in sherry casks. They're the Oloroso casks. They're the same casks that will be used for the Redbreast that we've been talking about. Now, Redbreast would use a combination. This is purely in Oloroso, and this goes to Emma's question earlier on. This would be totally in the cask. It wouldn't necessarily be conditioned as such. Conditioned would be if we took this whiskey and put it into a cask for 6 months or a year afterwards. This is totally single cask. Per se,
it's not quite single cask. It'd be a vatting of multiple different sherry casks, but it's all sherry casks in short.
Correct, yeah. And it's it's one that I said I wouldn't be one of my favorites. Writer's Tears wouldn't be one of my favorites, but this has changed my mind on it. Something completely. Well done, Emma. So, Dan,
I can see myself and Mike McLaughlin now, right, are going to stock up on that, and it will be our hip flask selection when they let us back into Thomond Park.
So,
Sorry, Langford, are you in on that?
Oh, I'm in.
Grand. Me, you, and Mike into the East Terrace whenever they let us back into Thomond Park to watch the rugby, and we'll put the Riders' Cheers Redhead into the Mother Max hip flask.
All I can say is, come on, a hand, the spuds are boiling.
There was a question in from Eric Hoffman asking, are there any cooperages in Ireland that are like there in Scotland?
Yes. So I believe the first Cooper to graduate his apprenticeship in a long, long time actually graduated only about 2 years ago or so in Middleton.
Yes.
Generally, there is one cooperage in Neffin in County Mayo. They are backed by their major backers. They haven't produced any whiskey yet as such, but their major backers are a company called Independent Stave. And a stave is the individual piece of wood that goes onto a cask. But they actually have a cooperage up there, but the vast majority of casks that come into Ireland via Spain, where sherry comes from, or Bordeaux, or so on and so forth, actually come in like IKEA furniture, come in flat packed, and the Cooper actually reassembles them in Ireland. So we don't actually make that many casks in Ireland anymore.
So if you actually go on to YouTube, and we YouTube quite a bit, and if you Google the whiskey channel or whiskey channels, there's the one that pops up. What are the patrons? Jeepers, I actually don't know what the name has gone out of. It's two bearded gentlemen. They're quite fun. They're quite good fun. But they have done, before the pandemic, they visited Middleton and visited Waterford Distillery. And in particular with Middleton, they were actually talking to the head cooper, and they were talking about the coopership apprenticeship program that was running, and kind of bringing it all back. And for anyone who wants Whiskey Tribe, yeah, Tommy, thanks. And for anyone then that wants to understand the difference between Irish and Scotch and all that kind of stuff, you have the Method and Madness range of whiskies, which was basically set up down in Middleton to look at different types of wood and how the wood and other ingredients would affect the flavors of the whiskey. Okay, we're coming to the end, right? I just want to say a massive thank you to Colm for joining us, right? A massive thank you to Dan, right? Emma is now leaving to go on another call. Emma, do you want to plug that while you're here?
Oh yeah, absolutely. My sister's making a movie which is going to be very, very beautiful. It's about dementia and about carers, and I think everyone in the whole world is going to or has had experience of one of those things. They're currently fundraising to be able to make that movie, and it's going to be gorgeous. It's called Mr. Wong's Lullaby, and I'm going to go and somehow around 9 o'clock play a couple of songs. Oh no. I might eat some food first, maybe.
I don't.
Finish off these whiskies and go and play a couple of tunes. So if anyone has any experience or any ideas around songs that you might like to hear on that, just send me a message on whatever social media platform you like.
How will we find the link to that, Emma? How do we find the link?
I'm sure Kennedy will send it into the group chat right now.
He's a good egg, is that Kennedy?
I like having an assistant. It's really nice.
You might keep him, yeah.
Good guy. Yeah. Or will it be under your social media if we check you out on Twitter or Instagram? Will it be there?
Yeah, I'm going to put it on Instagram. No, not Instagram. Twitter. If anyone's on Twitter, E Langford Music, come over and say hi, and I will put it up there. But Kennedy is going to find a link to their Facebook page, I guess, and put it into the comments.
Yeah, I think you had one up earlier. So we've just been asked about the hip flask service, just to ask about that, right? So just as we're ending, obviously the madness that is COVID-19 has caused all kinds of effects in all kinds of businesses and all that kind of stuff. We here have had to pivot, and I suppose I'm gonna look. We started a podcast, right? And the original name of the podcast was "Two Fat Guys Can Pivot," right? So that was the original name, right? Now we decided not to put it up, right? We're not self-conscious, right? But we decided not to go that road, right? But yeah, look. So we've invested a lot of time in whiskey training, etc., because like it's something that we've a keen interest in, and it's a way we can move forward and do nights like tonight as well as other things, right? So if you visit our website, mothermax.ie, not only have we got the growlers, but we also have a series of whiskey tasting flights. That whiskey range is going to grow over the next number of weeks. I'd love to say we'd be able to put up the range tomorrow. We have it. We're literally waiting on glasses to come in, Mother Max branded whiskey glasses. As soon as they come in, we'll have the whiskey flights up. The whiskey flight will come with a video similar to tonight, so we can do a guided whiskey tasting, and you can do it at your own leisure at home. We also have hip flask. Dan has mentioned that. So the hip flask it costs €25. It's branded with Mother Max, but it allows you entry into the hip flask refill service. So every month we change the whiskey listing, and for a set price, you can refill that flask. It's 175 mils, 6 ounces in American terms, and we offer a fairly good rate on it. It's definitely not what you pay in the bar for getting into the glass. And the idea of it is basically we're trying to introduce people to different whiskies, and I suppose to think outside of what we're normally used to. Because
here's why this is absolute genius, right? Because it's a gift that continues to give, right? So Christine, my wife, bought me one for Christmas, and she put Middleton Very Rare in it, which was my first sampling of Middleton Very Rare, which I was delighted with. Now, any time that any significant event turns up and Christine needs to buy me a gift, a birthday or an anniversary or whatever it might be, she just takes the flask, goes to Mother Max, puts a fancy whiskey I've never bought into it, and brings it home and goes, there you go. I made up.
Job done.
It's a gift that continues to give time and time again. It's top notch. I love it.
So I'm laughing because Miss Langford has her flask ready to go, and we were going to fill it last week, but we said hold tough until after the whiskey tasting. Has it changed your mind about what you were going to go with?
It very much has, yes. I was going to go with Napogue initially, and now I'm definitely getting the Redbreast. So not the Redbreast, the Redbreast. No, the Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears.
Yeah. Although I would actually go with the Powers 3 Swallows as well, to be honest. So both of those are beautiful. I just messaged there into the sorry Colm. I messaged into the group there. I accidentally pasted the email for the Glore Choral Society, because that's
the email is up there.
So if anyone wants to email Glore Choral Society, there you go. But also because Kennedy dropped the ball on my assistant role. Did you? Where? I didn't see it. Oh, there it is. Yep. So there's a link just there to the Mr. Wong's Lullaby video if you want to tune in around 9 o'clock and catch me very tipsily stumbling through a song or two. But yeah, I'm gonna. Sure, feck it. Stay put where you are, lads. I'll call down to you in a second. Like I'll get my flask.
Stay strong, lads. Stay strong.
So on that note, if anyone has any burning questions, whiskey related, that they want to ask it now.
Yeah.
Forever hold your peace.
Yeah, you can't message them ever again.
You can message me on Twitter if you want. It's Colm Leroy OC. So if anyone wants to ask me any whiskey questions, you can do it on that if you'd like. I can hold on for another few minutes if anyone wants to ask any questions.
We'll open it up, right? And just very genuinely, if anyone has any questions like that, if you get in contact with us here, myself and James, Thursday to Saturday we're here doing growlers, right? You can call into us and have a chat. You don't even have to buy anything. Just call in for the chat, right? Or you can get us on social media or through our email. We'll put you in the right direction to the right person.
If we can't answer it, we'll get it answered for you.
Yeah. And just final plug for me, shameless plug. So our 2nd of April, which is Good Friday. I didn't realise that when we set the date. We are having a blind rum tasting event similar to this. It's the total age of the rums being tasted, 6 rums, is over 90 years. So you can take it as an average of 15-year-old rum has been tasted. and it's going to be a bit of fun. We don't know a huge amount of rum, but we're really gonna give it a bit of effort. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us. We've certainly enjoyed it this week. We've probably had the most fun this week getting ready for this that we've had in a long time. And it's just little things like that. It's definitely a very unusual St. Patrick's Day for us, but we're really enjoying it.